Hi, and welcome everybody to this latest edition of our ProjectTeam webinar series. This is the third webinar we've done, kind of the second half of 2021 here. And today we'll kind of focus everything about managing project costs and changes inside of ProjectTeam.com. So to get started here, I just want to kind of do a quick overview of what we can do inside of the system. There's the first thing is managing contracts. So in ProjectTeam, you can manage multiple prime contracts and subcontracts, and then you can print those contract documents into different standardized formats, and those are called merge templates within our system. I'll go through, once I get into the system, the view of our contracts log, how to filter and print that information very quickly, and then kind of highlight some of the columns that you see by default so that you're always on track of what your information shows. In addition to managing contracts, you certainly can manage the change process within the system as well. So our change process can be as simple or as robust as you want it to be. You can start, depending on your role within the organization, maybe you're an owner group, whether that's a city or some county or even a commercial an owner, or you're a general contractor, et cetera, a subcontractor. You might have a different perspective and a different role on how you want to manage your changes. So in ProjectTeam, you can go the full way of managing change directives or field directives. You can roll those into PCOs. You can create PCOs from any other document. Let's say you're on an RFI and you want to escalate that to a PCO, et cetera. From a PCO, you can create requests for proposals, get pricing from your contractors, roll those cost proposals back into your PCO, and then eventually roll your PCO into your change orders, which eventually goes back to your contract, et cetera. So you can manage that entire process. I will be spending most of the time on this webinar going through that process, just to kind of give some examples there. And then finally, you can create and workflow detailed payment applications against those contracts, whether that's pencil copies, et cetera, to make sure that you have everything. You're always on an understanding of the percent complete, percent paid, things like that. So like I just mentioned, what is the kind of the workflow of documents in ProjectTeam and how those things work together? You don't have to use all of these documents, but I'll kind of go through a step-by-step. The first is you can create a directive. A directive is something that, let's say, an owner creates. It is not assuming cost yet. It's not assuming some change. It's just kind of telling somebody what to do. That can be rolled into a PCO. The PCO can then take the line items of the PCO. You can kind of request pricing, let's say, downstream from your contractors in what would be our RFPs. From the RFPs, contractors can create a cost proposal or a set of cost proposals that rolls back into eventually our PCO. From the PCO, we can create our change orders and then eventually our subcontract change orders, again, depending on your role within your organization and how you're using the system. All of that's certainly possible. You might just be using things like directives and change orders. If I am, let's say, an owner and I'm kind of skipping some of that downstream effects, maybe I'm connected to a general contractor that might be using more of those middle type of documents there. Or maybe I'm just a GC and I have a pretty simple process and I'm just doing things like PCOs and change orders. I'm kind of skipping the RFP. Maybe I'm handling that outside of the system or whatever it might be. So you have a lot of options within ProjectTeam.com to manage your change process in any way that you need. And then the other nice thing about ProjectTeam.com is that as you're tracking information, you can also integrate into your accounting systems. So let's say that I'm using ProjectTeam as my core project management solution. In a lot of ways, the point of a project management solution is to kind of be a forward-looking solution. I'm tracking potential changes and things that might be happening. Eventually, once I get to a point where those things are approved, I integrate that to my accounting system, which is kind of backward facing. So there's kind of a nice back and forth between the systems that might take place. So let's say that I have ProjectTeam as my core project management solution. I also have my accounting solution, which might be QuickBooks Online, For smaller organizations, maybe I'm using Sage, or for larger organizations, Oracle JDE. The way that you can integrate data from ProjectTeam is you can move data back and forth. So it can go either direction, or what some integrations will say bi-directional, depending on the statuses, on workflows, et cetera, within the system. I'm not going to go so much through integrations on this presentation. Just know that certainly you can create integrations, or we can have integrations between different systems in ProjectTeam. And I think there is a webinar later on in the year that we will kind of take a deeper dive into, setting up integrations, what is an integration in ProjectTeam, et cetera. Before I kind of get into the actual application and talk more, just kind of overview, if you are interested in integration, what are the benefits of that? I think there's plenty, but I would say the top 3 are streamlining your approval tasks, especially for time-sensitive information like invoices or payments or changes, things that I need to kind of get through the system very quickly. Obviously, there's some approval process that you want to have before going into the accounting system, but it's nice to be able to kind of automate that process. Next, I think one of the biggest frustrations about using systems in general is just double entry. By having an integration, you can eliminate a lot of that double entry, because the systems are going to be talking to each other and flowing data back and forth. And then finally, you certainly are increasing communication between your accounting side and your PM side, so that the data is always current and up to date, and we're not having to send emails which might get lost, et cetera, through our systems. But again, that's kind of a later webinar. In today's webinar, we're going to be mostly talking about all of the project changes, project costs, and how to manage those things inside of the core ProjectTeam platform. All right, so let's jump in here. I'm going to go over to the ProjectTeam login page. So I think I've done this on all the webinars I've done so far. Certainly, I could use my email address and my password. If I haven't SSO set up, I could use single sign-on. But for this, I'm just going to use my email address and my password, and then click login. I'm going to skip a lot of the basics here and just jump right into one of my projects. So let's say that I want to jump into this Plano demo project here and go over more of the topics of this webinar. At the top of my screen, I see my favorite form types. We have budget information, contracts, change orders, down to, let's say, RFIs. The reason I'm including RFIs in here is just as an example. You can create PCOs from any document, including RFIs. I won't go through that whole process, but I am just kind of pointing that out. If for whatever reason, depending on my role within the organization or the things that I like to use most often, I can always go in here to edit my preferences. Maybe I don't care so much about the budget side at this point. I'm really just talking about project costs and changes, commitments, things like that. The first page or document type that I want to get into for this presentation is contracts. So if I click into contracts, the first page that I see is my contracts log. As I mentioned on my first slide, you can manage as many contracts or prime contracts and change orders that you want inside the system. Some systems kind of limit you to one overall prime contract, and then you can create subcontracts underneath of that. We don't have that limitation here. You can set up as many as you want. Certainly you could have just one contract. That's totally fine, but you do have the option to manage as many as you need. From this log view, I can see, just like I saw from other log views in past webinars, I have different columns at the top, type, subject, contract number, or PO number, to business, etc. All of this is completely configurable by your preference. I can always go in here and configure my log to show or hide columns, or even rearrange columns as much as I need to do, so that this log looks really nice to me and it makes the most sense. Once I have the appropriate columns in my log, I can also click the top here and sort and filter this information. I might also look for things that are just not unit price contracts for whatever reason. Then I can always print. You have very strong reporting capabilities inside of ProjectTeam, but you can always kind of print any page very quickly as well. I'll get rid of this filter. One of the nice things about the log view here is that very quickly I can see the original contract value that is made up of all of the line items of my, let's say, my schedule of values on my contract. Are there any approved change orders that have been against this contract so far? And if so, what is the revised contract value that we're working with these days? So very clearly up front, I can see all three of those numbers. I can even add more columns in here, like I said, if I wanted to, but this gives me a very clear picture. I don't have to email anybody or look up in some other system. I very clearly see exactly what's going on here. And this, again, if we're integrating to another system, can be pulled from that data as well. So really nice to have that view here. If I wanted to create a brand new contract, so I have this list of contracts here, I could always just say new. It's going to ask me what type of contract. Let's say it's a contract, not a subcontract. I could say this is my new sample contract, contract number 001 or whatever. And then I have the ability to check a box to say if this is unit price or non-unit price. If it has unit price items in it, the schedule of values will be affected. So if I say save here, and I go down to the schedule of values, you'll notice there's additional columns here for unit measure, quantity, and unit price. And all of that will work together. So if I say 10 and 10, my scheduled value is going to be $100. So there's automatic math happening inside the system if you do have unit price contracts. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this and go back to kind of a standard contract. But I do want to point out that certainly you can manage the unit price type of contracts in ProjectTeam. And that's going to go forward to your other form types as well. So if I have a unit price contract and I create a change order against a unit price contract, I'll have those additional fields. If I create a payment application against that unit price contract, I can create payments in terms of quantities against those fields as well. Okay, go back. The contract that I want to go into is this Indigo Substation 230. So if I look through my log view and I click into an individual contract, I get to my form view or my contract view in this case. At the top of the form, I see general information or metadata about my contract, who created it, what day and time, what's the subject of it or title. Underneath, I have who the contract has been shared with at this time. Maybe I'm just keeping these contracts local to my organization, or for whatever reason, maybe eventually I have a consultant or something like that, or a CM group that's helping me manage my contract. Certainly I can share with those people. Underneath of that, you have the details of your contract. So this is kind of all the general field data that you might be tracking, type, subject, contract number, all that good stuff. If I continue to kind of scroll down, scope of work, which can be as long as you want, and then I've got my schedule values. So in the schedule values of a non-unit price, you can see I just have my schedule value number here. Below that, you have things like your change order markups, etc. All of the fields that I've shown so far can be completely configured to fit your exact needs, but these are the things that you kind of get out of the box. If I scroll up, one of the other nice things that you have on your contracts is that I can click on the drawings tab, see any drawings that are also tracked inside of ProjectTeam.com, maybe related to my contract. Same thing with specs, inclusions, exhibits, and then finally change orders. Change orders, which I'll go through an entire change order process during this presentation. Once those things go through all the appropriate workflows and routing for approval, etc., once those things eventually get approved, they log back into this change orders table here, which will update my revised contract number that we saw from that log. All right. So before I kind of go down through some of the other panels, I do want to just say, maybe I want to edit my contract. I can scroll through my contract. Again, we can set up as many fields or show the fields as we want here. But if I needed to add something to my schedule of values, I could go to the table here and just say add new. I could add a description, a value, and then link that to maybe my budget code or my account code as needed. That way it lines up in the right place in my budget reports. In addition to manually adding SOV line items, I could also go in here and import my rows. So let's say that I'm working on contracts that have 400 items at a time. Everything is really nicely broken out. We do that through kind of some estimating process or whatever. Now I just need to import that information to my contract SOV. instead of manually creating those 400 line items, I could just import that directly from a CSV file. And then finally, I know I touched on change order markups, but I just want to kind of say here, these are like pre-negotiated markups that you can add to your contract. That way they automatically apply to areas like your changes. In this case, I've got general conditions, a markup is 5%, and then my calculation level is 1, meaning that's going to be based off of the standard SOV. And then underneath of that, I have my fee, which is 1.5%, and that's going to be taken off of the line items of my schedule values collection plus my general conditions, which is why we have that 2 there. So you can set calculation levels to make sure that you have all of the different rates and everything set up on your contract. That way it's a standard going forward. It all makes sense on your changes. I'll go ahead and cancel. So we're kind of looking at this contract. The next thing that I want to do on the contract maybe is scroll to the bottom and look at a workflow. So workflow can be set off from the creation of a document, or maybe I'm setting this thing up, I have it in draft mode, I eventually want to send this through a workflow to get some kind of approval process going. I can say create new at any time. I can set up as many workflows as I want. In this case, I just have this one contract creation workflow, and then start. Once I do that, it might send it through any number of steps that you define here. So in the beginning of a project or at any time, you might set up kind of a contract workflow or any kind of workflow. And then once I set this off, it's going to follow the steps and the instructions of the workflow. In this case, I can see Josh Whitmer started it on 7/29. It's currently sitting at the step 1, which is my letter of intent. And I'm waiting for, again, Josh Whitmer to take action. From here, since it is in my court, I can take action, say pass, say it looks good, or I did what I needed to do, take action there, and that's going to move to step 2. Once I send something through a workflow, it's automatically sending email notifications to the appropriate users of each step, and then it's tracking that in the in-app dashboards. You can certainly report off of this data as well to make sure that you always know exactly, the ball in court, who the bottleneck is, etc. Underneath of workflows, you also have an attachments tab. So if I look at attachments, I'm actually going to pull over some here. I do have this sample contract attachment. Maybe I've made the official contract in some other system, and I want to be able to pull that into ProjectTeam.com so I have a good, clean record of it, and I can always find it very easily. I can just drag and drop that right into this attachments area. If I wanted to, I could always open up this contract by clicking it, and it opens up in a viewer. I could go into the file and see the properties of the file, upload new versions of the file. We do have a full version history included in the system. For now, I'll skip that. I'll trust that that is what I wanted to have. And I can scroll back up to the top of my contract. Because this is in a workflow right now, I do see this kind of green banner showing up saying, hey, this thing requires your action. I can take my action. I can approve whatever I need to do. But for now, I'm going to skip that and just X out. At some point, I might say, this contract everything is good. It's gone through its approval process, and I eventually want to approve the contract. This is just going to lock down certain fields of the contract so that I can no longer edit the information, or nobody can edit the information. And really the point here is any further changes that need to happen to the contract really should be happening through a change order. From here, I might say that on my contract, I actually want to print this to some pre-formatted output. Again, you can set up as many of these, and these are called merge templates in ProjectTeam. Merge templates as you want, whether it's a late contract letter or a fully executed letter. Do I want to get that out in PDF, or since I created this in Word, could I get it out to Word if I need to make any last minute adjustments? I can go to my next step here. Do I want to include the actual document that I dragged and dropped into the system for my output? In this case, I'll say yes, and then merge. What's happening here is it's taking all of the data that I deemed appropriate for this merge template. So these fields, Indigo Substation 30, the contract number, etc., pulling that into my output, and it's also attaching the output that I had. So this is completely custom. You can set these up to be exactly what you need them to show. I've got some kind of project logo in here, my color scheme, I've got some kind of cover letter, and then underneath of that, I've got my signature. Then I also have the actual contract that I drag and drop into the system here. So all of this is really nice. It's very nice and easy for me to create this document. It looks great, and now I can either download this to store it on my machine. I can download this to set up in my Outlook or my email, or I can even just share and email this directly from the system. So if I wanted to do something here, I could say I'm going to send this to, let's say, my Gmail box. I can put a note in there and then say save. It gives me a little indication that that thing was sent through email. And if I actually go down to the reference links area of the contract now, I do see that there's a merged document or an official document that is that ABC fully executed contract letter. If I click into that, it shows me what that thing is. And in the activity, it's always going to tell me exactly what email addresses this has been sent to so far. So I can see now at 3:20, Josh sent it to this Gmail address for whatever purposes. Okay. If I go back to the reference links here, it's going to take me right back to the contract. So in summary, so far, we looked at the contract log, we created a contract, we workflowed the contract, we added attachments, and then we created some kind of output based on that contract that we've now emailed directly to whatever recipients we need to include. From here, let's get into kind of the change process. So if I click back to my home page, or if I click on the forms drop down here, it's going to show me those favorite form types that we looked at from that project homepage. Change orders, contracts, cost proposals, etc. I mentioned directives, so let's say I'm also working with directives. I could start there. I'm going to skip that step just for time and as I explain things during this presentation, but certainly we could start with a directive as well. And if I wanted to, I could just search for directives and create a directive. I'll go ahead and edit that. So if I go to my PCOs, this is going to take me to a list view of all of my PCOs on the project, just like I saw with my contract log. Now I have my PCO log. The PCO is going to have different form fields associated with it that I can now use to edit my log view. Again, I can configure my log however I want it to show. But this makes a lot of sense to me where I'm showing some revenue information or budget information, let's say, and then some cost information in here included. What I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new PCO. We're going to follow through the entire process, eventually make a approved change order, and then check back on that contract that we just looked at to make sure that that is included in the contract. So to do that, I'm going to just go ahead and say create a brand new PCO. I'm going to create it against that Indigo substation that we looked at. We can tell it's not a unit price contract, so we won't have those additional columns, which is totally fine. And I can say choose my contract. Once I do that, I get to this new PCO form where I can start to fill out the fields. So what I'm going to do is, just so I remember what to put in there, I'm going to say this is the relocation, let's say fiber optic cables. In the PCO number, you can put in whatever you want. You can also make this an auto numbering field. So if there's something like, you know, my PCOs start with 2500 for owner PCOs or 2300 for whatever, you can set up different types of auto numbering schemes in ProjectTeam. Right now, I just have this as a text field. So I'm just going to say 23,001, put in my date of the 29th. If I did have a directive, this field would auto populate. I could also link an existing directive, or I could create a brand new directive right from here, again, so that everything is organized in one spot. It makes it easy for me to find, you know, exactly how this change got initiated. If I start to scroll down, you'll notice that some of these fields are automatically populated based on, let's say, the contract that I selected in the beginning. I can fill in a scope of work. I do have some of these top level informational fields, total estimated revenue down to total approved cost. These are all going to be based on, once we get into this cost breakdown table here, the items of the cost breakdown table. In this table, to create a new record, I can say new. Before I do that, since this table can get sort of large, you can always expand this to the full size of your screen by clicking that little expand button. In here, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple new line items. So I'll just say create new. In this one, I'm just going to say fiber optic cables. I might link this to a subcontract that we're working on already. So maybe this is the electrical and fire alarm for whatever reason, subcontractor. It's going to fill in there my responsible business and my contact. And then I have this little table, which is going to let me kind of track all the information leading up to eventually my approved data. So let's say that as I'm filling this out, I'm assuming that this might cost about $3,000 for my own internal tracking and kind of track how I do historically. I'm going to put that 3,000 in there. When I do put in a number for the revenue, it automatically is going to calculate the cost side. However, I can always update this if I ever wanted to. But in most cases, let's say those things are going to be pretty similar. So it just kind of helps you there. I'll skip the proposed and the approved values for now because we're going to get to that in a second. Once I add that, I can also say add a new. And then I'm just going to say maybe there's some also some additional work. And this is going to be self-performed work, so it's not linked to any subcontract. And I'm just going to say I'll propose, $9,000 for that. It might also go into my cost. I can edit or change this information as I need to, but it does allow me to update these numbers. Once I add the different line items to the table, and I could always add as many as I need, you'll see that those markups that we added from the contract side are automatically applying against those top level items. In the cases where maybe my owner or maybe I just don't like to see cents, I can always edit these items here to make the most sense. Okay, so instead of showing the 25 cents to the 75 cents, I'm going to change that to be a nice clean number. All right. So now that I've created my PCO and I have lots of detail on my PCO, I can go ahead and save this document. Just like we saw from the contract, on the view mode of my PCO, I see general information at the top, who created it and when, who the information has been shared with at this point. Are there any inclusions, exclusions on my PCO? What are the fields of the PCO? You can see these top level fields have now been updated because we updated our table. And when I'm viewing the table, it gives me this really nice kind of view here. Because there's so many values and so many ways to track this information, we give you kind of a color-coded scheme here with the budget or revenue side in the blue and the cost side in the yellow. The other thing that I want to point out is depending on your role within the organization or your role on a project, owner, contractor, subcontractor, etc., you can also show or hide different columns of this chart. So let's say that I really don't care about the revenue side. Maybe I am more of an owner and maybe except for funding, things like that, I really don't care about that piece of things. I just want to show the cost side. I can hide this entire section if I wanted to. It's not going to screw anything up. You can show, hide, reorder these fields to be an exact fit to what you're looking to do. Alrighty, so let's say I do have this PCO now. I do have this line item 1 here is talking to this B. Walsh company. I am estimating that I have about $3,000. I think it's going to cost about $3,000, but I'm not really sure. I don't want to make an assumption, of course. So I'll go ahead and check the box next to that line item and create a brand new RFP to actually ask that Tony Walsh what his number actually is. So I'll go say yes here. This is going to now create a brand new document, which is my RFP document. And I'm just going to say this is the request pricing for fiber optic cable move. Okay. In the RFP reviewers, I'm just going to add myself. So anytime a cost proposal is sent against this RFP, I want to make sure that I always receive an email about that. Again, we have the director of reference, which would have been auto-populated, but it's not there. Some instructions, need pricing because whatever. I can also add in my scope of work if that makes sense. I'll give this guy a due date of, let's say, 2 weeks because I need to eventually provide pricing back to, in this case, my owner. And then the work breakdown here. I can add as many line items to this work breakdown as I want to. In the case where I've created the RFP for my PCO, it's automatically just pulling that one line item in there. But I could spruce this up however I wanted to, or if I forgot something, I could always go back to pull in additional PCO items. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save the RFP here. Now that I have this RFP, I might, just like any other document, include attachments. I can include action items. I can have a discussion on here with my comments. I could also link this to any other form just for my internal knowledge. And then I could eventually send the RFP. So when I send this RFP, it's automatically going to check the people from my work breakdown. So it would check, let's say, Tony Walsh or whoever. And then he would be able to receive an email about this, get back into the system, and decide if he wants, to provide some cost on this. His task at this point would be to create a cost proposal. So if he says create a cost proposal, he's going to say it's against that line item, and it's automatically going to populate here. So it's going to say info about fiber optic cable move. Subcontract reference, RFP reference, all of this is automatically filled out. It does tell me, by default, this is cost proposal number 3, just kind of a nice auto system generated number there that I can kind of look back through my reports and find exactly what's going on. Description of work. Let's say that Tony's going to go in here and say this is actually $6,000, and I'm going to request 3 days for this type of work based on what you've provided me so far. Once he does that, he can certainly go in and save the document just like we have in the past. He can go ahead and share this with his internal team. They can collaborate on that, make sure everything is good before eventually submitting the cost proposal. So what we've done here is we created the PCO. We added line items of the PCO. We created an RFP against the PCO line item. Tony, or whoever this person is, went into the RFP, created a cost proposal against the RFP, and now he's about to submit that cost proposal, which is going to take us all the way back to the original PCO, which we're about to look at in a second. So if I go ahead and submit the cost proposal, you'll say, are you sure you want to do that? I'll say yes, it's going to be a submitted date. This thing is going to lock. It no longer is editable on this proposed amount field because now this is submitted. And I can go over to my PCO now, go into the relocation of fiber optic cables. Since I was on the RFP reviewers field, I will probably shortly receive an email that says a new cost proposal has been submitted there. I can go back to my PCO. If I go down to the cost breakdown, I will notice these little dog ears now showing up on my collection. This is saying that there's been something submitted on, from, let's say, a vendor or a contractor against these different line items. If I click on that, it'll actually show me the information about what was submitted. It came from Tony, it was $6,000. He's requesting 3 days from that. If I have multiple cost proposals against a single line item, that's fine. I can choose the one that I want to include in this document, and I can say choose. Once I do that, you'll notice that these fields are automatically going to be updated based on his values, and that little dog ear is going to turn from that bright yellow to a gray saying you've already checked this out and chosen one of those items. I can always click back into this to view the one that I selected, and this is a live link to get back into the cost proposal. But this is showing me, kind of a really nice historical view of everything that went into this change. Once I have these cost proposals, I can certainly go in here, edit the PCO again, scroll down and say that I want to edit this information. Now that I know there's $6,000 in here, I can add, whatever negotiation has happened. Let's say it was just the $6,000. Same thing, go to that second line item, which is kind of our self-perform work, and say, you know what, I was about right with that $9,000 and put that in there. Okay. Now I've updated all this information. It's all updating on the table. Again, we have this whole markups area. If we wanted to just show straight up numbers, I could do that. It's going to say that I've got $15,000 or almost $16,000 in this approved PCO at this point. So I can create that. Once I go through the entire PCO process, I'm able now to create a change order, which is going to include information from my PCO. So if I click create change order, it's going to say, are you sure you want to do that? Of course, I'll say yes or no. I can also include all the line items of my PCO. So if I have kind of a detailed agreement with my client and I want to be able to show a full and open information, it's going to show that. If I want to just summarize all of that line item, including those markups into one line item on my change order, I could do that as well. I think that's probably the more common case. But for this example, I'll just say show all line items and say yes. Once I do that and I go to my change detail here, once I do that, it's taking me to my change order. Okay, now I'm creating a brand. I took the PCO, I've escalated it to an actual change order. And if I go to the change order tab, I can see all of the line items from my PCO now showing up in the change order details, giving me that same 15,900 amount. It is telling me that I'm taking from the PCO line items. It is referencing the PCO number in this document. And I could also create new items directly from here if there's anything else we negotiated or we talked about and I need to add that on there. I could always add this. The other thing that's nice about the change order is I can include multiple PCOs in a single change order if I wanted to roll those up. And then of course I could do reports and dashboards on that information. So I've got that 15,900. If I look back on the general tab, if I scroll down here, it is going to show me my original contract amount, which is against the contract we've looked at. There have been no previous change orders, which makes sense because when we looked at the contract, there was nothing on that tab. It'll show the value of this change order, which is that 15.9, and what our updated contract value is going to look like once this thing gets approved. Okay, so I can see all that, and now I'm just going to say save. Just like we did on our contract, since change orders are almost like a mini contract here, I can still go down to the workflows area, start a workflow. Again, the workflow can be as robust as you want it to be. In this case, it's very simple, just a two-step workflow. In the cases of integrations in the past, you might set up a workflow, and the last step of the workflow, based on or according to that approval, is going to actually flow the data to your integrated solution or your ERP solution. But in this case, I have this very easy two-step workflow. Again, I can add attachments to all that, and I can go to the top, print this to whatever change order document that I want to see as well. Again, it'll take a couple seconds, and then give me my formatted output in whatever change order format that I need to see. Okay, so in this case, I've got this prime contract change order, shows all the general data, all the line item data, and then it's showing me kind of all the detail information about how this would be affecting my contract, et cetera. Go ahead and cancel this. Once all of that is flowing through, I've got the appropriate approvals. I can approve the change order, which now locks some of the fields. I can go back to my original contract, which is where we all started here, this Indigo substation, and you'll notice directly from the log immediately, I see that 970 was the original. I've got that 15.9 in approved change orders, and that my updated revised contract value is that 988. If I actually go into the contract just really quickly, I check out the change order tab at this point, you'll notice all the data from my change order is now populating this nice change order list on my contract. So again, everything is in one nice, neat place. It's reportable, it's easy to find, and it makes the accountability of my project very easy. Next, so kind of, again, in summary, we went to the contract, PCO, RFP, cost proposal, back to our PCO, eventually to our change order, into our contract. The other process that you can manage in ProjectTeam is the payment application process. So if I click on forms here, I can also go down to payment applications. In this log, just like the other logs that we've seen, I can see all the information about the payment applications that we're working with or that have been submitted, how many have been paid, etc. I haven't shown how to configure my log, but I think this is a good place to do that. So if I say configure log, maybe I don't really care about the contract reference. I do care more about the to business or the to contact, whatever. I can save that, and you'll notice that my log is going to refresh, take away the columns I don't want to see, and add the columns that I do want to see. Okay, so very easy to make all those changes in your log view. Again, sort, filter. I can search by each one of these columns and all that. In this case, I've got this last payment application 9, that doesn't look like it's been paid yet, so maybe I need to review that, add the appropriate information before we eventually submit that. I can click into payment application. I've got my standard form view here with the shared column at the top, details column, action items, activity, workflows, attachments is all included. In the payment application form, a lot of these fields are going to be out of the box to try to fit into kind of a standardized format that you might already be used to. Again, just like any other form, you can configure this document to show or hide whatever fields that you want to see. I have this general tab here. I've got my financial summary tab, which is giving me some nice summarized data. And then I also have my item breakdown. Again, this collection gets kind of large, but you can always expand this to the full size of your screen so I can scroll through and see exactly what's going on there. I'll go ahead and close. If I wanted to edit the item breakdown here, I could click edit mode. Again, I could expand. I do have kind of a custom field added on in this case. Let's say that I'm some organization called Plano. Somebody submitted a pencil copy payment application to me, and I'm kind of reviewing these different items. I can always go down the list here as I'm reviewing, check the boxes, save this, go to lunch, come back, and know exactly where I left off, which makes it nice that I can kind of track that in that case. If I'm somebody updating this information, if I was going against a unit price contract, I'd be able to see those unit price fields available to me. Someone could very easily go in here, update things like their percent complete. Once I do that, you'll notice that these fields are going to change. So if I click out there, that changed from 9,000 something to 10,000 something. So all the math is kind of permeating throughout the system. The other nice thing about the payment application is on your retainages, I could go in and add the retainage or drop retainage as I go through the project, or I could go in and set retainage for all rows, and this is going to allow me to set something like 5 and 10, update that, and you'll notice that all of the rows are automatically going to now take that new retainage value. So you can make very quick changes within your payment applications or go line by line within each one of those and make those adjustments. I'll go ahead and save that. Just like I've done on other documents, I can approve the payment application to lock down the fields, and then any changes need to happen through an additional payment application. I could print this. In this case, I'm going to do kind of an industry standard form that's going to give me kind of a cover sheet and a detail sheet on the back that shows all the information that I needed to show. I can include my logos and whatever else I want to show on these different invoices or payments here, but it does give me a nice detail breakdown. The last thing that I want to do on this webinar is kind of very quickly jump into the reporting area. Of course, all of this financial information can be tracked in ProjectTeam, organized in ProjectTeam, collaborated on, etc. But you also have the ability to roll any of this data into some really nice reports. So I'm going to jump into reports and just kind of run through a few here. I think in later August and in September, I'm doing 2 pretty large webinars on everything about reports, from a simple reports, getting started in reports, to an advanced reporting webinar. But in this case, I can go in and say, I want to see my change order log, maybe my owner change orders here. It'll run this report. These can be formatted with whatever color scheme or logos, etc., that you want to see. All of these, has really nice data. It seems like I'm grouping by some kind of, I think this is my contract number, and showing my change orders within each one of those. Same thing if I want to run something like my contract status log. How am I doing on my contracts? What are the revised contract values? Do I need different bonds required for each contract? All of that is available in this reporting side. And then lastly, what you can do is, let's say that I have 4 or 5 different reports that make a lot of sense to me, and I want to actually include those into some weekly report or some monthly review with my representatives, whoever it might be. I can do something called a chained report, where I can take 3, 4, 5, 10 different reports, put them all into one output like I have here, and then now I can see I've got that contract status log. On page 2, I've got my owner change orders. On page 3, 4, I've got change orders grouped by contract reference. So now I'm taking all this data from all these different areas within my system, putting them into one overall output, and then being able to, offload that from the system, take it into my meetings, etc. Instead of manually manually running that, I could have also scheduled that report so that it automatically hits my email box or whatever other recipient's email box of whatever recurring time and day of your choosing. All right. So that's kind of what I wanted to go through today. I kind of close up here, kind of some final thoughts. I mentioned a couple other webinars that we have coming up in the future, whether that's budgets or integration talk or going through reporting capabilities. You can always find our upcoming webinars on the resources page of our our standard ProjectTeam.com website and clicking on webinar schedule. And then what's next? I know, I think there's a very large audience for this webinar, which is awesome. And there's a wide range of people either that are users or that are looking to become users. Where do you go from here? If you are not already a user, I think you kind of have three paths. You can either learn more about the system, download our buyer's guide, or there's plenty of resources on our website. Continue to evaluate ProjectTeam and all the different features that it has. Download our feature brochures or watch short videos. And we also record all of these webinars, so you can go back through and see all those. And then eventually, if you are ready for a one-on-one demo, if you want to talk to somebody like myself on specifically about how ProjectTeam could fit and meet some of the needs that you have, go ahead and set up a call or a demo, and we'd be happy to help. All right, so that is kind of the end of the webinar here. I do want to answer some questions if they come in here. The first one is, can you view contract information on your mobile devices? Yes, all the features that you have access to in ProjectTeam are also available on your mobile devices, so you can go through, see all that information, and make decisions based on that, no matter where you are. Contracts have both unit price and fixed items. Certainly you could do that. So if I say a unit price contract, it's going to automatically give me the different columns for that unit price information. It is consistent throughout the entire schedule of values there, but you could always say that one of the different rows is a fixed price item or something like that, where I just say it's a quantity 1, I've got my overall value, and it gives me that data. All right, well, we got a bunch of questions here. I'll make sure to follow up to some of these questions after the call here to give more detailed responses. But I appreciate everybody jumping on. I look forward to talking to you guys in a couple weeks to our next webinar. And thanks for joining.